It started like any other night. Tucker Carlson walked into a quiet upscale restaurant, expecting nothing more than a good meal. But what happened next would send shockwaves across the country. The waiter approached, but instead of handing him a menu, he leaned in and whispered, "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't serve you here." At first, Tucker thought it was a joke. He let out a small laugh, but the waiter's face didn't change. The room felt colder. Other diners turned their heads. Murmurs filled the air. Tucker glanced at the manager standing near the bar, arms crossed, watching him. He wasn't just being denied service, he was being made an example of. What he did next, no one saw coming, and by the time the night was over, the entire country would be talking about it. For a few seconds, Tucker just stood there. His usual sharp-witted confidence was met with something unexpected: silence. The air in the restaurant felt thick, like a storm about to break. A few people whispered. Some smirked. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Tucker slowly placed his hands on the table, leaning in slightly. His voice was calm, but there was a weight to it. "Let me get this straight," he said, locking eyes with the manager. "You're refusing to serve me. Why?" The manager, a tall man in his 40s, took a step forward. He wasn't nervous. If anything, he looked prepared. "Sir," he said, choosing his words carefully, "we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone, and in your case we've decided you're not welcome here." A pause. Tucker tilted his head. "Because of who I am." The manager's lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't answer, but the message was clear. The whispering got louder. Someone in the back let out a low chuckle. A woman near the entrance pulled out her phone, already recording. Tucker wasn't just being denied a meal. He was being humiliated, and the whole room was waiting to see what he'd do next. Tucker exhaled slowly, scanning the faces around him. Some were entertained, others indifferent. But one thing was clear: everyone was watching. This wasn't just about a meal anymore. This was a moment. A younger man sitting near the bar, dressed in a sleek suit, smirked and raised his glass. "Guess free speech doesn't come with a side of steak, huh, Tucker?" A few people chuckled. The manager didn't react. Tucker's expression didn't change. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. Instead, he did something no one expected. He smiled. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he pulled out his wallet, took out 3 crisp $100 bills, and placed them on the table. "For the waiter," he said. "I'm sure he doesn't make the rules." The waiter hesitated, looking at the manager for approval. The manager shook his head. "We can't accept that." Tucker shrugged. "Suit yourself." Then he turned and walked toward the exit, calm, composed, untouched by the scene unfolding around him. But just as he reached the door, a voice stopped him. "You think walking out makes you the bigger man." It was the same young man from the bar, now standing, drink in hand, smirking. "Come on, Tucker. Give us one of your famous speeches. Tell us how unfair it all is." Tucker slowly turned back. The room fell silent again. Everyone expected him to respond with anger, maybe even throw in a sharp remark. But instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and hit record. He held it up so everyone could see. "I don't need to say anything," he said. "You're doing it for me." The smirk on the young man's face vanished. The manager stiffened. The entire restaurant realized they weren't just watching a moment unfold, they were now part of it, and it was all being captured on camera. That was the moment everything changed. The second Tucker's phone started recording, the energy in the restaurant shifted. What was once a smug little spectacle suddenly became something dangerous. People who had been laughing a minute ago looked away, pretending to check their menus. The manager's jaw tightened. The young man near the bar, who had been so confident just moments earlier, suddenly wasn't smirking anymore. Tucker kept the camera steady, slowly scanning the room. "I walked in here for a meal," he said, his voice measured. "I wasn't looking for trouble, I wasn't making a scene, but you all decided to make one for me." The manager took a step forward, his tone now laced with forced politeness. "Sir, we've asked you to leave. You're making other guests uncomfortable." Tucker arched an eyebrow. "I'm making them uncomfortable, or is it the other way around?" The restaurant was now dead silent. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, standing frozen near the kitchen. And then, a woman near the back, someone who had been quietly watching, stood up. "I don't agree with everything he says," she announced, her voice clear. "But this isn't right." Murmurs rippled through the room. A few heads turned. A couple at the corner booth whispered between themselves. Then, another voice. "Yeah, if they can do this to him, they can do it to anyone." Tucker turned the camera toward the voices, capturing their faces. And just like that, the power in the room shifted. It was no longer Tucker against the restaurant. It was the restaurant against something much bigger. The manager's face paled. The young man at the bar sank back into his seat, staring down at his drink. Tucker lowered his phone, but he didn't stop recording. He looked the manager straight in the eye. "Still think this was a good idea?" The manager swallowed hard. Before he could respond, the restaurant doors swung open, and what happened next? Nobody, not even Tucker, was prepared for it. The doors swung open, and for a brief moment, the sounds of the city outside flooded in. Everyone turned to look. A figure walked in, someone no one had seen before. She was tall, confident, and dressed in a crisp black blazer that screamed authority. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor as she walked straight to the manager. The room was still, every eye locked on her. Tucker raised an eyebrow, slightly confused. Who was this woman, and why did she seem so familiar? The woman stopped in front of the manager. Without saying a word, she pulled out a badge from her purse and flashed it toward him. It was clear, the badge wasn't local law enforcement. It was something much higher. "I'm with the Department of Justice," she said, her voice cold and commanding. "And this restaurant just made a major mistake." The manager's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The entire room shifted uneasily. Tucker didn't move. His camera was still rolling, but his eyes were now locked on the woman. "I suggest you close your doors for the day, sir," the woman continued, her gaze fixed on the manager. "Because what you've done here goes way beyond bad customer service." The manager's voice finally broke. "What do you mean?" We just didn't want him here." The woman didn't flinch. "It's not about not wanting him here," she said, her voice growing louder. "It's about targeting someone because of their political views. And you don't get to do that, not under federal law." The room went completely still. The atmosphere was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. Tucker stepped forward, his camera still pointed at the woman. "Is that why you're here? Because of the law?" The woman turned to him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Oh, it's much bigger than that." Just as Tucker was about to ask her what she meant, her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at the screen, and for a split second, her face shifted, her eyes widened, and her expression faltered. Without a word, she walked quickly to the manager, leaned in, and whispered something to him that was too quiet for anyone else to hear. The manager's eyes grew wide. His hand shook as he reached for the counter to steady himself. Tucker was no longer the only one recording. Several people in the restaurant had pulled out their phones, capturing the intense moment as it unfolded. Then the woman turned, walking straight toward the door, without another word. Before she left, she glanced back at Tucker and said, "You'll want to check the news tonight." And with that, she was gone. Tucker looked at the manager one more time, who was now looking like he was about to collapse. The young man at the bar sat completely still, staring at his phone. Everyone in the room was frozen, unsure of what had just happened. But then, as the last few seconds of the night ticked by, something remarkable happened. Tucker didn't say a word. He just turned, calmly walked toward the exit, and stepped out into the cold night. And that was when everything broke loose. By the time Tucker got home, his phone was blowing up. The story was everywhere. A few hours later, major news outlets picked up on the incident. But what they didn't know was that the woman who had come to the restaurant had just uncovered something far bigger than any of them could imagine. Tucker Carlson wasn't the only one being targeted that night. And that is when the real story began. To find out what happens next, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. This is only the beginning.